Oshkosh City Council meeting. This is a workshop at first. Then we'll actually go into our City Council meeting. And we have several folks speaking tonight. I think that City Manager, perhaps we can get some introductions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I believe there's some people online with the Department of Corrections. I know Joan Cook is online. Joan, if you could perhaps introduce the folks that are joining us virtually. The Department of Corrections has some regulations about participating in meetings. So, Joan, if you could go ahead, please.
Sure. I am one of the supervisors in the Oshkosh Probation and Parole Office, and my counterpart is Chris Souza, who works with the other unit in the Oshkosh office. Our purchase of service person is Mike Momans, and he works out of our regional office. We also have Heather Dietering, who is a representative from the Sex Offender Registry program. And Brian Munch is on from the TLP, as well as Rob Pitson, who is in charge of the TLP through Trinity.
Thank you very much. So in addition, we are going to have representatives from the Community Development Department, the City Attorney's Office, and the Police Department to provide some local perspective. And then just as you see from the agenda, the Neighborhood Association was very kind to submit 3 members of the public who will address the council afterwards. And then Officer Mann has been distributing some cards for questions, so we can keep that as orderly as possible. And I believe there may be some online questions that may also come up. So, and I know council has received some comments from some of the neighbors, so you have that for reference as well. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but otherwise we'll get right into the Department of Corrections. And I defer to Ms. Cook, but I'll wait to see, Mayor, if there's anything else you'd like to say for good of the order.
Sure. I did just have one kind of general question. Is this part of the Midtown Neighborhood Association boundaries, this location?
Yes, this
Some people are nodding, some people are shaking their head. The City Hall itself? No, the TLP. Okay.
Yeah, TLP.
All right, thank you. No worries, thank you.
So, Ms. Joan, if you could, I'm not sure if you're going to start or if somebody else is, but the outline that I provided you is pretty much the outline that I provided council. If you could just give us some overview and how you're managing these TLPs right now, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, I can give you an overview of what we have in Oshkosh. Mike can give you an overview of the basic facilities around the state and how they work. We place people coming out of the prisons, and that is all of the prisons, who need a residence. So part of their reentry planning, which is started in the institution and continue once they are out, is that we will assist them with a residence for approximately 90 days, sometimes a little shorter, and sometimes it can be extended for extenuating circumstances. These are individuals who have either resided in Winnebago County in the past or committed their offenses in Winnebago County. So they are the individuals that come through. There are 8 beds in our current house on Jefferson Street, and they are made up of a wide variety of people. They include drug offenses, property offenses, assaultive behavior, up to the sex offenders that the community does get notified, which are special bulletin. So this is a place for them to go to look for the jobs, to start saving some money for them to be able to move out into the community in order to be productive members. So once they are in there, we provide them with resources in the community in order to move them along. I will have Mike, if there are questions I can answer, but I'll have Mike kind of explain the whole idea of the transitional housing.
Thank you, Joan. From a statewide level, I think it's important for us to take a look at the scope of what transitional housing services are. We currently have 377 beds scattered across the state of Wisconsin, those being located in approximately 40 communities. The Department of Corrections, one of the divisions is Community Corrections, which all of us represent today. The Division of Community Corrections is broken down into 8 regions, and we represent kind of the Northeast Wisconsin region, which is Brown, Allegheny, the Lakeshore, kind of the 5 counties surrounding that area. Within that region, the one that we represent and the one that I oversee the contracts for, we currently have 50 beds located in those counties. We're actively seeking additional beds in Calumet County, Kewaunee County, and we have an ongoing search for more services in Winnebago County as well. The current facility, as Joan referenced on Jefferson Street, is the result of a request for bid process. When we have services that are determined necessary and critical to delivering our mission and our vision, which is stabilizing individuals, preparing them for release, and having a successful reentry, coupled with programming, those services have to go out for a bid process. The competitive bid process is initiated by our regional office. We determine where we have needs, where we have a critical function, where we have gaps in services. My job is to develop a budget for these services and then do the bid process. This current bid process was adhered to in accordance with state statutes and with our code. The contract was awarded to Trinity, and Rob is representing the vendor, Trinity, tonight at this meeting. That bid, we've been in the Oshkosh area for approximately 10 years with this current location. And the most current contract initiated in July of 2018. It's on its first renewal. It's a 2-year renewal. And we have full intent to see this contract through. It's a valued contract. It provides a great service, not only for our persons that we supervise, the people that are in our care, but also for the community. It adds a level of accountability and safety for our individuals in the community. And it is, as Joan indicated, it helps stabilize our offenders that are there. It's important to note that I think later on in the presentation, it's important to note that these transitional housing services are not 24/7 facilities, meaning there's not somebody on site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We've added cameras in response to being a good stakeholder and a good partner, but they are not staffed 24 hours a day. It's also important to note that they do not provide treatment within these locations. So as a result, they are not licensed under the state of Wisconsin, but we do respect in the siting process of the conditional use permit and other zoning requirements that the local cities may enact as a result. Anything more, Joan?
No, that sounds good. I will have Chris Sousa talk about how the agents manage their people at the TLP.
All right. So our agents, they tend to have a caseload of individuals who are in prison, and they'll know ahead of time when they're getting released, and they'll start planning about 6 months prior to the release as far as where they're going to go. Often when individuals don't have any community support, so family or friends that they may be able to live with upon the release, and they may not have any saved up money or anything else to get their own place right away, well, the agents will often make a referral to the TLP. So then upon their release, they would have somewhere to go to provide some sort of stability initially upon their release, so they're not being left homeless or trying to fend for themselves out in the community. And so with that, there's a wide array of individuals who are placed in the TLP, from very low risks to some of those that will have a higher risk. So there may be somebody who's going in there who may not need to be seen by an agent except for once every 3 months, all the way up to being required to be seen once a week. These individuals, they're placed on electronic monitoring bracelets, as well as potentially GPS if they qualify for that type of monitoring services. And the agents will be checking in They usually take them to the TLP initially on their first day there, and then from there they'll schedule additional appointments as far as based on what their current risks and needs are, and how often the agent needs to meet with them to satisfy those needs as well. Whenever there's any issues with the living arrangements or the supervision violations of rules, the agents will get notification of that, and then they tend to respond to that very swiftly and taking appropriate action as needed on that. Joan, is there anything that I'm missing?
For now, I think that's good. I'm not sure if you want Trinity to explain anything, but I thought they were listed lower in the agenda.
Yeah, they were. I think part of the idea was for you to give a general overview, and then we can talk about some of our regulatory authority. So, yeah, if you want to hang on for a little bit after our staff talks about some of our responsibilities or
Yes.
our authorities. So is that it on this end of things, Joan?
That's it, unless there are questions. I mean, we can share a lot more information, but just that's kind of a summary of what happens at the TLP.
Yeah,
I don't know if this is the appropriate time or not. There were some questions that came in to all council members that might, I want to go back to Mike. He indicated he was responsible for the budget. Troy Schlack emailed and asked what part of the DOC budget pays Trinity and why doesn't the city receive property taxes?
So the Department of Corrections has budgetary line items. It's under the appropriation 111 account. In the Department of Corrections, we have approximately, I think it's $34 million set aside for services to assist our individuals in reentry treatment and other needs, ongoing needs. Those are generally targeted for indigent offenders or those that don't have insurance or other means to pay. But appropriation 111 is the technical account, the coding string that I utilize to pay our vendor. As far as why don't we pay taxes, I would be going outside of my comfort zone to give you a safe answer other than I know that we're tax exempt with many of our line items. So I don't know if that's enough to answer your question.
Yes, so that was Troy Schlack's two-part question, and maybe city manager can take the
I'd be
other
more
part.
than happy to, because I'm actually giving the council a report this Friday from the Wisconsin Policy Forum that talks about what's now known as the Municipal Services Program, which is intended to provide reimbursement to local units of government for police, fire, and refuse services. As much as 20 years ago, we were getting reimbursed about 80 cents on the dollar, maybe even close to 90 cents on the dollar. Over the last 20 years, we are now getting reimbursed about 34 cents on the dollar. The state has reduced that amount on a regular basis. So we had previously been getting reimbursed for our share of police services. This is for all state-owned property, whether it's tax exempt such as this facility or the university. I mean, it runs the whole gamut, but we're only getting about 34 cents on the dollar, and you'll be receiving that report this Friday, as a matter of fact.
Okay. This might go back to Joan, possibly. Trevor O'Brien asked, how often does the DOC check on conditions inside the property? Joan?
Oops, sorry, got it. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm not sure if you heard the question.
Yep, I did.
This was an email question that came in, sure?
This is about how often we are in the house,
Yes.
correct? Okay. So agents are there on a pretty regular basis. I can't tell you that it's every week, but it's every other week. We also have a transport sergeant that is there as well. Generally what happens is that the agent will go in and meet with their offender or the resident that's there, generally take a look around the house. I know there have been some times when the house has not been clean. So we will, and So what we do is we tell all of our people that it is their responsibility, and I know Trinity does the same, and to keep things clean and explain what that means as far as the bathroom and the common areas, as far as, everybody does their own dishes, that kind of stuff. If there is a reason for us to be there for a deeper search, there are several of us that go at the same time to check in all of the closets and nooks and crannies in order to make sure that there's nothing there.
Okay.
If I could add, excuse me, we do, as part of the contract, we do contract with Trinity, and they are required to provide 3 daily checks, random checks at the property.
I'm sorry, was that Trinity's contract? Okay. Thank you.
And
Okay, I think it'd be appropriate for staff to talk about some of the legal issues of responsibilities that we have. I believe Mr. Lyons is going to be talking initially from the zoning standpoint. So Mark, if you could go ahead, please.
Yeah, so just for a little bit of background on the zoning ramifications for this property presently exists as a legal non-conforming residential use. It was constructed in 1961 as a duplex and remains a duplex today. Prior to 2017, this property was zoned R2 residential. In 2017, the code changed and that designation was updated to TR10. There's 2 significant implications from that zone change. The first was that it became a different zoning district, R10 TR10 two-family residential. And second, that the property went from a legal residential use to a non-conforming residential use. Under the code at the time, prior to 2017, a family could be defined as up to 4 unrelated individuals living in a unit. In 2017, that changed to 3 unrelated individuals. So prior to 2017, up to 8 individuals could have been housed in the duplex, 4 on each side, for a total of the 8 unrelated individuals. Under the current code, that same situation would require a conditional use permit for a residential roommate living arrangement. That's the only way you can get above 3 per unit now. So the 4 on each side can continue as a legal non-conforming use as long as they don't have a 365-day gap in that use. We don't regulate turnover of residential units, so this really just functions as a standard residential unit under our current code, because we never regulate how often the turnover of individuals living there are. That's not something that zoning can regulate. So the property can either, 1, continue to operate as a legal non-conforming residential use, or they could apply under our current code for a conditional use permit for that roommate living arrangement to kind of codify the 4 people per side. Obviously, the conditional use permit would have to meet those strict standards of the current state law for conditional use permits. But under today, it is a legal non-conforming residential land use.
So I'm a little confused. So is it 6 now, or is it 8 total?
So if this use was tried to institute today, under today's code, it would only be 6 under straight duplex
Right.
zoning. 8 would have been the prior to 2017 allowance.
But because it was in existence and was legal prior to the zone change, it can continue with 8 now.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
So Mark covered kind of this specific property. If we want to look at this more in terms of general regulation, there's a couple of things. We can regulate the behaviors of individuals at this residence the same as we can with any other residential property in the city. If you're too noisy, if you have furniture in your yard, if you take your trash out too early, all of those things, we can address those the same with these residents as we can with any other resident in the city of Oshkosh. But from a property use standpoint, again, it's being used as a residential use. We may face some challenges regulating a residential use based on the identity of persons who live in that residential property. As a general rule, we can't do residency limits based on the characteristics of residents, except the limited exception with that is some municipalities have regulated sex offenders. So the way they do that, municipalities can regulate to protect the health, safety, and welfare. And generally, legislation is given broad deference by courts. If there are constitutional issues, the court's going to apply a little stricter standard of strict scrutiny, and they're going to ask if the regulation serves a compelling governmental interest and whether it's narrowly tailored to serve that interest. So when you look at sex offenders, by state statute in Wisconsin, cities are not permitted to regulate the placement of Chapter 980 sexual offenders. We are preempted by statute. But again, some municipalities have passed ordinances prohibiting non-Chapter 980 sex offenders from living within specific distances of certain facilities like schools, daycares, and parks. And some have also prohibited offenders who are not originally from the municipality from establishing residency there. Well, generally, courts have in the past upheld sex offender residency ordinances. We might be seeing now a willingness to look at these ordinances with a little greater scrutiny to make sure that they're advancing legitimate government interests and that they're not too broad, that they're narrowly tailored, again, to address a specific problem, and that they're not just simply intended to provide further punishment or to just create impediments for people to establish a residency. In 2017, a federal court struck down Pleasant Prairie's ordinance, finding that the ordinance was, in that case, just simply intended to be punitive in nature, and that the village had presented no justification for the domicile provision, again, not letting somebody who hadn't been from Pleasant Prairie relocate there. The court concluded that without a legitimate basis for that, that violated the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. So they applied that higher standard, the strict scrutiny standard. And recently, I participated in a statewide conference call with municipal attorneys, and it came up on our call within the last couple of weeks that several municipalities have received either new lawsuits or notices of intent to sue over their sex offender ordinances. At this point, they've not gotten into litigation, but it's just an indicator that there are some cases still coming up and relying on that Pleasant Prairie case. The lesson from the Pleasant Prairie case and these more recent challenges, I think, is that courts are maybe going to be less likely to just simply defer to governing bodies' determinations. So if, after you get all of the information, council wants to take a look at an ordinance, I think the lesson from this, the Pleasant Prairie case, and the fact that there are other cases potentially coming forward, is that we would probably want to do a good scholarly review and also look at some empirical data to see whether an ordinance could be supported, what type of ordinance might be supported, and what restrictions might be reasonable. That way, if you do move forward with something, we would actually have some empirical data to rely on, something that unfortunately Pleasant Prairie did not do and weren't able to rely back on. So just something to keep in the back of your mind as you go through this.
Mark, anything else?
No.
I think Chief Smith can kind of give a perspective on local law enforcement and our rule book we work from.
Well, good evening, everybody. Just wanted to start out by just kind of sharing briefly what the role of law enforcement is here in the city of Oshkosh related to the TLP location. Our role is primarily to enforce the state statutes and local ordinances. That's the role of law enforcement. We try, in everything that we do, we try to do it in a manner that's even across all demographics and all persons within the community. One of the other things that we do on a regular basis is that we meet with our core team regularly to discuss sex offenders, and specifically our SBNs, or special bulletin notice sex offenders that are being released into the community. As the mayor's aware, we do We do meetings on a regular basis, and by statute, I'm permitted to do community notifications of serious sex offenders. We have one coming up on a 980. It's going to be coming up next week. 980 placement that's going to be occurring out near the landfill at the facility the county built out there. We've been working with the neighborhood well over a year at this particular location. We've been doing regular checks of the location to see if we can observe any violations that are occurring. We respond to numerous concerns or calls from citizens. We've done 168 monitoring checks at this location since February, where we have officers that are going by and just monitoring the location, making sure that there's nothing visibly violating the law or an ordinance that we could actually take enforcement action on. We do correspond with neighbors on a regular basis. We have met with neighbors. We also responded out when probation and parole has issued warrants for those who are in residence there who have violated rules. We've gone and made arrests for those incidences as well. And that's all I have.
Just this email, you may be able to answer, or maybe one of our other guests, from Lisa Drew. My question is, why were neighbors not notified that 3 residents removed their electronic monitoring bracelets? This is clearly a safety issue for area residents. Absolute disregard for our neighborhood. We should have been notified immediately to be on high alert to keep our families safe. Is that something you can respond to?
Can you repeat that again?
Why were neighbors not notified that 3 residents removed their electronic monitoring bracelets? They were expecting to be notified, apparently, in the area.
And we don't necessarily notify on all of those, and I don't have all the particulars. I do remember it, I just don't have the particulars of it. We did discuss this maybe 6-8 months ago, and I don't have the details specifically on that.
Okay, thank you.
Joan, I don't know if you heard that question from the mayor that was given to her by a resident in terms of what's the protocol. I'm rewording the question, but what's the protocol if someone takes off their bracelet?
Our monitoring center that's stationed in Madison gets an alert that it has been cut, that it's been tampered with. At that time, they try and determine whether there is actually a tamper with it. If they are not able to locate that individual, they will issue an apprehension request, and that is usually a nationwide for felons, so that they can be apprehended as soon as they're located. Generally, we don't notify the neighbors of anybody wearing a GPS if they choose to cut that off.
Okay.
Thank you. Joan, the next item on the agenda was about explanation of contractor responsibilities for TLP. Is that going to be someone from the corrections department talking about, or is this the point where you're turning over to Trinity?
Actually, I'm wondering if I can go back to Heather Dietering. I totally skipped her. She is in charge of all of our sex offender programs.
Seems okay.
Councilmember Peschel?
Well, that was going to be one of my questions, is that I felt that we skipped over that portion of the agenda.
Oh,
But
no,
I can-
I'm sorry. I was trying to ask the questions as we went through
No.
with the ones that were here, so if I
No, I think
confused
it's
anybody,
2C.
my apologies.
I think Joan and I missed that, so
Okay.
Joan, just trying to go back to 2C, because there was a specific item about management of, so, yeah, and Heather is going to be able to do that, Joan?
Yes, Heather, if you would address the programs.
I can talk about the sex offender registry. So what that is I work for the sex offender registry program. It's driven by state statute. The Department of Corrections manages the registry per statute. So without going detailed, I'll give you a Reader's Digest brief condensed version of what the registry is, but it went into effect in 1997 and went retroactive to 1993. And what it is there are approximately 31 mandatory offenses that require registration in the state of Wisconsin. In addition, the court can also order what's called discretionary registration. In addition, when we have folks from other states relocating to Wisconsin or have military, federal, or tribal convictions or comparable offenses to Wisconsin convictions, state statute may require them to register as well in Wisconsin. Just to kind of give you numbers, I ran them yesterday. There's a little over 25,800 folks that are required to register in the state of Wisconsin. When we break that number down further, there's about 13,700 that are not on probation and parole, but are required to register still. And approximately 6,200 are what's on probation and parole supervision, so what Joan and Chris and Mike work with supervision. And then approximately 5,900 are incarcerated. So when we talk about someone's required to register, it could be a period of supervision plus an additional 15 years or lifetime registration. And non-compliance, if charged, is a Class H felony punishable by up to 6 years in prison. So we talk about numbers in the area just to kind of, again, put things into perspective. There is approximately, I had approximately 569 registrants residing in Winnebago County. Milwaukee has 2,900, Brown 675, Fond du Lac 285, Outagamie 624. So it kind of gives you numbers regarding each county. But the intent of the law is to strike a balance between community protection, the public's need to be informed, as well as successful reintegration into the community. We also wanted the intent is to reduce anonymity too. Before these laws were passed, there was not a registry that folks could see, okay, these are folks that have been convicted in the past of sexual boundary behaviors, nor was there a means for law enforcement to provide notification before the enactment of those statutes. So when someone is required to register, and this is separate from probation and parole, they're required to report where they live, where they work, where they attend school, where they volunteer, and all internet identifiers that are for personal use. If they have any changes in that information, by statute, they are required to report that within 10 days. If they're on probation and parole supervision, changing their residence, it's within 24 hours. They're also required to verify their information by returning registration and confirmation letters within 10 days verifying their information. And there's also some additional things that are required as well. So when we talk about, there is a public website. When I mentioned there's over 25,000 individuals that are required to register, while law enforcement has the authority to notify the public on every registrant, that's a lot of folks. So there is a public website. I encourage folks to look at that. It has a great frequently asked questions section. You can sign up for alerts. You can search by someone's name or geographical area and sign up for those alerts. I just caution folks because the only folks that will not appear on there is our registry contains folks that have adult convictions and juvenile adjudications. So due to HIPAA laws, juvenile adjudicants will not be on the website. So when we talk about, the chief had mentioned special bulletin notifications and core meetings. When we talk about special bulletins, again, that's driven by state statute. So if someone on 2 or more separate occasions has been convicted of a registrable offense and they are releasing from prison, before they're released from prison, the Department of Corrections will send a notification to that law enforcement and sheriff's department of this person releasing. And then what law enforcement does is they call a core meeting. A core meeting usually contains someone from representatives from the police department, the sheriff's department, the Department of Corrections, the supervising agent, the probation and parole supervisor, someone like myself, a specialist. In some areas, the district attorney's office is involved. Each core meeting is a little different on the makeup, but the intent of the meeting is to discuss this person's release into the community, where they're going, what's their history. And this meeting assists law enforcement on any kind of further notification. And we talk about levels of notification that come out of this meeting. So this could be the public website only. It could be we're going to target certain neighborhoods or organizations, or it could be what we call a level 3 notification, which could be a community notification. It could be a media release. It could be flyers. So there's different levels of notification. And again, it gives law enforcement another tool to kind of look at what would be an appropriate response with this person releasing. As the chief indicated, we do have regular core meetings. We also have staffings that aren't cores, that with probation and parole and the local police departments and sheriff's departments, because we feel that an informed community is a safer community, and working together, it's a partnership. Again, I can't say enough positive things about Oshkosh Police Department. Primarily, I deal with folks that are off supervision that are required to register. So if I run into a concern with something or an investigation, I've reached out to them for assistance, and likewise, they've come into contact with us as well. I feel like we have a great partnership, and it's really important to work with law enforcement in the community.
Councilmember Allison Osby.
Thank you. Can you please repeat how many sex offenders are in Winnebago County, and in Winnebago County, how many of them are located in the city of Oshkosh?
Okay, so what I ran numbers, there's about 500, when I ran them today, there's 567. I got my notes here. Every day the numbers change. So they're only good as the moment you run them, but there is approximately 567 in Winnebago County. I don't have the specific, I can search the registry by zip code. And I realize if I run certain zip codes, it might encompass more than just the city of Oshkosh. So I don't have the exact numbers, but when I ran certain zip codes the other day, for 54901, there was approximately 177 registrants. Again, that could be off supervision, on supervision. I think when I ran 54902, there was approximately 108. And 54904, I saw approximately 27. But again, that's just zip codes and may encompass more than just the city of Oshkosh.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I think the next part is, getting a little more specific about this facility. Joan, I'm not sure who's going to talk about number 5, the explanation of contractor responsibilities for TLPs.
I'm not sure, Rob or Brian? I don't see Rob's picture, so I don't know if he's still on.
I'm here.
Okay, so do you want to share? Hi.
Hi.
You want to share the?
Sure, and Mike can probably share DOC's perspective of our contract responsibility. As he pointed out before, it was a bidding process, and we have certain obligations in contract. What we provide is monitoring daily at an average of 3 checks per day. Sometimes it's not exactly 3, sometimes we do 4, because we like to mix it up, and the more intermittent the checks are, the better it is for people to figure out that we could come in at any time. We don't want to get into a habit where we're coming at the same time. So the checks are throughout the day, every day at different times. And we report, when somebody comes in, and is Brian still here? I don't see Brian. Yes. Okay, yeah. And Brian can give you the details of a typical referral, but we go through the rules with everybody that comes into the place. We have a rule process working closely with the Department of Corrections. Wanted to emphasize that the people that are referred to a TLP, unlike the people that would have been referred to Trinity's halfway house, are a different level of people. The halfway house people get 24-hour per day supervision. Those that are referred to a TLP are by and large those that would otherwise be moving into the community anyway on their own without the additional layer of daily supervision provided by a TLP. So and some of those, as pointed out by Chris before, might not have any place to go and might end up on the street. And so not only does it help ensure the success of people to turn their lives around and once again become productive members of society, but it gives that extra layer of protection and safety for the community. The referral process specifically, if you wanted to talk about the highlights, Brian, if you would.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to just start out by saying that I've been in the Oshkosh TLP community for 17 years. The last 10 years with Trinity, but prior to that, there was actually 5 different locations sprinkled throughout the city, which some neighborhoods weren't very happy with. Trinity went ahead and bought the location that we're currently at, so we have all 8 under one location, which I think is very helpful, especially with maintenance and other things with 4 or 5 different landlords. But as far as intakes go, when a new client comes in, we have about 30 house rules that we go through. There are some clients who come through more than once, so they're usually pretty familiar with the rules of the house. They have their own supervision rules as well, which they're very familiar with. And we just make sure that we intake them. We actually buy them some food supplies for their first week there, and then monitor them 3 times a day on average. And any violations of house rules or probation rules, we get to the agents as soon as possible.
Could I just clarify? So I think I understood someone earlier to say that it's not just sex offenders that are at the TLP, that there can be a mix of offenses. Is that right?
That's
Yes,
correct.
there's almost always a mix of offenses. I don't think we've ever had exclusively sex offenders there.
But it's specifically designated for reentry. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, okay. I just wanted to make sure I held that in my head correctly.
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Allison Osby.
Thank you. One other thing that I just wanted to double check on, because I just noticed that with the discussions through the virtual participants about whether somebody is online or not, and I just wanted to check with City Manager Roloff that the understanding is that all of those that are participating virtually will be listening and participating through this entire meeting, correct?
Yes.
Because I want to make sure that the participants virtually are also hearing from our community members. Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure.
I encourage everybody to stay till the end of the meeting, but thanks for
Okay.
clarifying that.
Sure.
Because
Councilmember Peschel.
yeah, we have questions.
Sure.
That is our understanding as well. I just wasn't sure with internet, sometimes we get kicked off.
Thank you, Joan.
I'm sure we can come up with a dial-in for you if that happens. We've had that happen a few times. Councilmember Peschel.
Sure, so my question is for Rob or Brian. How many people are moving through the house in 1 year, do you think?
I actually compiled a list probably back in February or March. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I do recall about 80% of the clients who came through were what I consider model citizens. They're there anywhere between 15 to 90 days. I could get back to you on the exact number, probably through the last 6 years since we've been sending DOC reports to Madison. I'm not sure of the exact number per year, but I can tell you that right around 80% or more were considered model clients when they completed their up to 90 days.
Sure, Mayor. So, did you say between 50 and 90 days was there time at the facility for 80% of those?
90 days is usually the maximum. There are some exceptions at times. I've actually seen them there 3 days throughout the last 10 years. Sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's usually between 60 and 90, I would say, is the average.
60 and 90. And if you can compile those numbers, I'd surely be interested in knowing what that number is. And if you could give it over like the last 3 years, 3 to 4 years, that would be good as well.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Does the Department of Corrections audit the 3 times a day check in to confirm that that's being complied with? This is City Manager Mark Roloff. I've heard questions from residents. Some may be asking that tonight, but how is that done? Because there are some concerns that that is not being done. And how does that confirm that that is being done per the contract?
This is Mike. I'll take a shot at this question. At the end of every month, our vendors are required to provide us documentation which is attached to their invoice before payment. That invoice is reviewed. We do take a look at the number of checks that are completed per month. As Rob indicated, there are some variables from time to time. If a staff person might be out with an illness, if there's severe weather, and I'm talking generally across all programs, there could be a month where they may miss a check or two. Typically what happens is those are deducted from the cost. Under the new contract, there's a deduction fee for missed checks. If there are missed checks, and Rob is aware that there might be a situation, we have communication where he will let me know that Brian is out, or whether it's another vendor, they will let me know that there's a vendor, that there's going to be a missed check. That's generally permitted, but they are audited, to answer your question.
Looks like we're at the history with Trinity, or did I skip local management of TLP?
I'm not sure if...
I think we're at number 7.
Probably, yeah.
So the DOC's history with Trinity and management of the local contract, which we kind of, sounds like we touched on a little bit there, if there's anything, is how many homes does Trinity contract with DOC on these TLPs throughout the state?
Well, Trinity provide a wide variety of services, but pertaining to TLPs, we have provided services in Rice Lake and Oshkosh, where we currently are. We also have currently provide TLP services in Eau Claire and Wausau.
Councilmember Fischel.
Sure. Rob, my question actually kind of, I don't know how long you've been with Trinity, so my question relates back to when Trinity purchased the Jefferson House. From your perspective, or from Trinity's perspective, what's the benefit of that location? I know in order for a TLP to be practiced, they have to have a certain amount of points related on certain priorities that are meant to be beneficial to the enhancement of those in the program. So from your perspective, what's the benefit of that Jefferson location?
Well, being close to public transportation and in a place of the community where jobs are likely to be able to be secured. One factor might be laundromat, things like that are close. We do have laundry facilities, on facilities, so that wasn't the issue. But before purchasing the home, this was back in 2010, it was a coordinated effort with the Department of Correction and the Police Department. Before purchasing the place, it was approved by DOC, and the Police Department gave their okay with it. They didn't have any specific concerns with that particular location. So it was a location of the neighborhood, as well as not only how it would benefit the residents there, but in a neighborhood that didn't pose any undue risks. For example, not directly across from a large playground or something like that.
So I guess my next question is that were you actively looking at other places within the city, or was this the primary location that was kind of being viewed by all entities involved?
No, I looked at a variety of options, and those that developed as plausible in terms of the purchase then went through the approval process.
Okay, thank you.
So if there Are there any other questions from council members of these folks before we move on to some citizen statements? There were opportunities to submit questions in advance. I read through some of them. Chief Smith? Yes, sir. Oh, you have the cards? Okay. I believe we also have individuals here representing Midtown Neighborhood Association.
Yeah, I reached out to three members of the community who will be speaking on behalf of the group, and Betsy Kundi is, I'm not sure, Betsy, you're first?
Betsy,
or
there's Betsy. I spoke with you on the phone.
It's up to you guys.
Actually,
Come on up.
Joe Stevenson, who's the president of our neighborhood, is not here.
We need you at the mic.
Yeah, come on up here to the mic and give your name and address, please.
My name is Bruce Cundy. I'm next door at 1115 Jefferson Street. Been there ever since the TLP's been there. And Joel was going to speak to you, or had intended to be here, but I got some written comments that he wrote that I'd like to read to you if I could. It goes as, I am contacting you today regarding the workshop for the transitional housing tonight. I would like the council to direct staff simply look into an ordinance or update the land use regulations within the zoning code to allow the orderly and smart placement of TLP housing individuals that have been convicted of crimes or sexually related crimes within the city of Oshkosh. By no means should these facilities not exist. Quite to the contrary, these facilities, when run properly, are instrumental in the rehabilitation and giving people a second chance to become productive members of society. All we are advocating for is the smart and orderly placement of TLPs. We want TLPs to be given the same level of thought and care by city zoning and as we would any other business, going through the process when choosing a new location. The TLP location in Midtown neighborhood is less than 800 feet from Merrill School, and it's been that way for 10 years. While I realize this facility would be a legal non-conforming and allowed to remain even after the ordinance is updated, it is unacceptable that another facility similar to this to be located this distance from a school where children pass by daily on their way to school. There are planning tools that can be used and rules that can be put in place to prevent this situation from happening again. The situation that Trinity has put these residents at 1105 Jefferson does not set them up for success and endangers the children of our community. While our neighborhood has many complaints regarding the quality of this facility located at 1105 Jefferson, we realize the contract for this facility is not with the city of Oshkosh. The failure to provide quality housing, neighborhood communication, facility oversight, and adequate programming is the result of DOT contracting with a poor service provider, Trinity. We will continue to pursue ameliorations, that was a tough one, to these issues with the state, but what we need from the city of Oshkosh, City Council, is to ensure that situations like this do not arise again. We need smart placement for TLPs, that the house people who have been convicted of crimes have a place to improve their lives. And with that, Joe says, thank you very much for your time and stay safe. So that's Joe's statement. Can I say a little something?
Certainly.
Just based on a few things that I heard discussed up here. Being next to this facility for 10 years, I heard comments, and I just kind of wrote those down. One gentleman said, tend to respond swiftly. Tend to respond swiftly. I disagree. When we reach out to those people at Trinity who's responsible for enforcing those rules, that they do not respond swiftly. The City of Oshkosh Police Department responds faster. And these are issues that we don't really understand where the line is drawn between what the police can do and what the people at the house can do. We get continued mixed messages. Trinity will say they can do whatever they want. They have full license. Some are bad people in there and some are not. But we as residents have no idea what's going on. None. We've had situations, and I think the police department is at a really big disadvantage because I don't think they know who's in that house. I don't think they know. I've seen instances where people outside of that facility walk in, and yes, we've had officers right out in front of the house doing their check, and they walk out and leave, and we know they're not a resident. And that tells me that they don't even realize who's coming or going from that place. So tend to respond swiftly? No, that's not the case. Trust me. I didn't expect to spend too long talking about this, but 10 years is enough. How long does that facility have to stay next to my house, in my neighborhood, close to that school? 10 years is enough. I'm not sure any of you would want a place like that next to you. I understand it benefits people, and I hope that they do, those people that live there, adjust and give them the proper tools to improve their lives, but they're not. They come and go. Your question was how many do come and go through? They don't even have enough time to probably say, hi, how are you? And they're gone 2 or 3 days later. I don't think I've seen anybody there that's been there 90 days. No, that's not the case.
So can I just ask a clarifying question then?
Go ahead.
So is the objection to the TLP being there, period, or is the objection to the way it's managed?
The objection that I have is there's a contract to be followed between DOC and Trinity, and it's not being adhered to. No, you've heard things tonight that they are being adhered to. I can tell you that I'm 70 feet away, and they're not being adhered to. They're missing a lot of points. And that's my objection, because I think these people that live there deserve better. And if their purpose and, as they said, their mission and vision, I don't see either one of those. As
Thank
far
you.
as related to the people inside of that facility. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a response to that, if I can.
Yes, who's speaking, please?
Brian, this
Okay.
is Brian. I have never said to anybody in the neighborhood that these people can do whatever they want, so where that came from, I'm not sure. The other gentleman who does the monitoring has been there maybe 3 to 4 years. I can't speak for him, whether he said that or not. Also, being there 10 years, I've never heard one complaint. I've heard complaints about, oh, the children walk by the house all the time and there's sex offenders that live there. Well, I've never heard one allegation of, oh, my child got propositioned by the sex offender. That's never happened. It's never come back to me that's ever happened. I understand the neighborhood people live in, sex offenders live on the corner, children walk by because there's a school nearby. I get that part of it, but there's never been one complaint in 10 years of a child being propositioned or inappropriately spoken to. So I get the scenario, but I don't understand the reasoning of just because they're sex offenders in that specific area.
Councilmember
And Joan-
Peschel? Oh, sorry.
Joan can attest that every Halloween, the guys cannot go out at all. They can't answer the door. Like, everybody's locked down. If the kids come to the door, no one goes to the door and hands out candy. So that's one rule that's always been in place for at least 15 years.
Councilmember Peschel?
Sure. So, Brian, you kind of narrowed in on children being propositioned and children being in the neighborhood. I guess I'd like to broaden that concept of in asking this question is, so you haven't really heard anything related to that, but you have heard a lot of complaints from neighbors regarding the management or the operations of the TLP in general, correct?
This is Rob. What I have heard are complaints about people being in the yard or being seen in the neighborhood. It seemed like there's a sense in the neighborhood from many, if I understand it correctly, that folks that live there should be inside at all time and just really not be seen. And so we have sent the message that people aren't in a jail. They are allowed to be in the yard. They're not allowed to have visitors in the house. And we welcome any concerns or complaints about anything that they would think would be a rule violation. Our job is to observe, document, and report rule violations to DLC. But rule violations are typically those that range from not cleaning your room to not smoking in the designated area, and those kinds of things. It is appropriate if there's anything that approaches any risk of safety or imminent danger or harm to call the police, because that is the police role to intervene when there's a safety concern. As Chris and Mike were saying, a TLP doesn't have a 24-hour staff response. If there's a rule violation, like somebody hanging out in the yard too long, in somebody's opinion, that will be addressed by staff the next check or the next day, but we typically don't run over immediately because we don't have the capacity, and that's not part of the contract. But we encourage that the police are called if there's anything at all that approaches any kind of concern for risk and safety. And as I understand it, there haven't been a lot of crimes committed on the property by residents there. And I think we have a good relationship with the police. And sometimes, as Joel mentioned, there's police over there for things like an arrest warrant or some other kind of violation that doesn't have to do with a crime being committed there. And that can seem like, oh, there's a lot of bad things happening there, when it might be a better example of just a good cooperation and coordination between DLC, the police, and Trinity. I think too, the perception of sex offender, there seems to be a anxiety and concern that those people that are there, all of them are at risk of being predatorial towards children, and that's not the case. I can see why it could come across as that, because notifications in the neighborhood happen regarding certain sex offenders, but people aren't notified at all about the guy that's coming in there whose offense was forgery or bouncing bad checks or what have you. So I think there's that perception of the volume of a certain level of risk seems to be a way that it just isn't. Again, those referred to a TLP are not those that are considered to be predatorial to the extent where they need 24-hour supervision or a high level of care. If they did, they would not be referred there.
Thanks, Rob. City Manager, and then I think we need to move this back to the citizens' comments.
Mr. Kundi had raised a question, and I think it's appropriate to ask Mr. Pitzman. The Chief Smith pointed out that our enforcement capability is with state and local ordinances. We can't enforce house rules, for lack of a better term. One of the house rules that Mr. Kundi pointed out was the presence of guests, and it sounds like they're prohibited. So do you get those calls? How do you field those calls? And what recourse do you follow for that type of violation? It may or may not be a specific criminal activity, depending on what that person does when they go there, but what's your protocol for that?
Well, we welcome calls if people think there's an unwelcome guest. And if there's an ability to come over, especially before we had cameras, those were helpful tips because it might be in between checks. And then if staff had the capability, they could come over and find out if that there indeed what is an unauthorized visitor, or if it's just a new resident or what have you. Now that we have cameras, we have motion sensors, so it picks up footage anytime somebody comes to the door or approaches other parts of the yard. So we check daily, Brian checks daily about any of that camera motion. And if it is indeed an unwelcome guest, then it's reported to the Department of Corrections, and the agent determines as the sanction, if any, for that individual.
I'd like to add to that a little bit too. There are some misconceptions. Just within the last 3 months, we had a gentleman who was married. He wasn't living with his wife. He forgot to change his address with the post office. So he asked his wife, I believe from jail, I think he was still in jail at the time, can you pick up my mail? I forgot to change my address. So we'd have a female showing up at the front door 2 to 3 times a week. And then we get the call of, hey, there's a female at the front door. Well, we don't explain the rules to the spouses and the kids, the children of the clients. We explain it to the client. You can't have any visitors. They can't be on the property. She had no clue that she couldn't be at the front door ringing the doorbell saying, can I pick his mail up? So that created quite a stir for a number of weeks very recently. And it was something that she had no idea was part of the rules.
So we had another citizen that would like to speak, I believe. If you could give your name and address, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Betsy Kunde. I live at 1115 Jefferson, right next door to the TLP. I am the Midtown Neighborhood Association Co-Safety Chair. We are asking that the City of Oshkosh create and enact an ordinance to regulate future TLPs in the city's boundaries with the conditions of proper zoning, licensing, and monitoring. The city currently does not have an ordinance which limits their ability to act and enforce items within the contract without engaging local and state offices. The current contract auto-renewed on 3/31/20, with the next renewal date being 3/31/22. Additional monitors need to be hired, as currently the amount of things expected of the two current monitors is really beyond what 2 people can handle, and seriously not in the best interest of the TLPs or neighborhood residents. Per the contract, Trinity is obligated to do on-site inspections a minimum of 3 times a day, once per shift, with times to be varied, and checks are not to occur any sooner than a minimum of 3 hours after the previous check. In a 6-month time frame, utilizing timesheets we received via an open records request for the timesheets for the monitors of 1105 Jefferson Street, we found that 20% of the time visits are over 12 hours apart. 23 to 40% of the time visits are missed completely. First and third shifts have 40% of visits over 12 hours apart. Someone had said that Brian works third shift. We have not seen the other monitor over the third shift ever. And we see Brian intermittently. My question is, if he does work third shift, does he check on his breaks? Maintenance of the TLP. According to the contract, all items are to be in functional, good repair, and clean. There was an issue with the kitchen sink in one of the units that went on for so long that one of the residents took matters into his own hands to rectify the situation, as residents weren't able to wash dishes or use the sink. He said, I was just sick of it. It was gross. They'd come in, they'd look at it. It needs to be looked at by a plumber. No plumber was called. There are windows without screens. We mentioned this back in February. There's still no screens on the window, on some windows. Some screens are ripped. Fascia is falling in at least 3 areas on the outdoor portion of the TLP. There are 2 window air conditioners precariously placed in windows. One of them doesn't have sign panels. The drapes were blowing outside the side sections of the air conditioner. Currently, there's cardboard shoved in there right now. There's supposed to be adequate furniture for TLP residents as listed in the contract. A couch, a love seat, end tables in the living room. One of the residents of the TLP said, we don't have furniture in there. We have broken lawn furniture. They're broken lawn chairs. We did receive some pictures from this person who would like to remain anonymous, by the way. The pictures are of wet and stained carpeting.
Excuse me, just a moment. Could you maybe pass that around to council members so they can actually see it? I can't see from here.
Yes, okay, the pictures that are here show the lawn furniture inside. Whose duty is it to report these issues? Whose duty is it to rectify these issues? How much time do they have to rectify these issues via the contract? Now we come to the house rules. The house rules listed in the contract are not to be enforced by Trinity, or they are not being enforced by Trinity or reported to probation and parole for review. We have gotten directions from Mr. Peitzman that the monitors don't have to enforce those, that they are allowed, the inmates are allowed to, or the residents are allowed to have visitors and be outside. They're just like everyone else. And the reason they picked the location is because we have such a great neighborhood, and it's so that they can aspire to be just like us. We're role models. Well, Mr. Peitzman, this is not my fun part-time job. And Brian, I really find it hard to believe that you don't think that there are any issues there when we notified you and also notified the police department. There was a woman and 2 children inside the TLP. The people were there dropping off groceries, I believe, but they were inside for 45 minutes. The police that responded told us that, you know, they can't do anything. It's a house rule. They really aren't violating any ordinance in the city. They were talking to us about that, and they said, well, the monitor is inside right now explaining the rules to them. And I said, the monitor just left. He walked right around the corner and left. Some of the residents, we have talked to them. We're told sometimes you guys don't show up for days. We have our own cameras. I have purchased a security camera. One of the other neighbors has a security camera. There was a theft in the neighborhood. Being the good neighbor that Rob said he was going to be, we asked for the footage of the cameras. I know Mr. Mullins was requested to look at the information to see if anything he could see was stolen from the property across the street. He said he wasn't really sure what he was looking for, and he wasn't ever told what house had the issue. I don't believe, I could be wrong, but there was a camera outside, and at one time there was two. Then the one that was right by the door disappeared. I know there was supposed to be an additional two being put in at some point. I'm not sure if they went internal, but the whole property, I don't believe, is under surveillance, as Brian Burns, who lives next door on Baldwin, can attest to that 90% of the time, Brian Munch is walking up his driveway, and he said he's been startled by him more than once. And he walks around the back of the property and into the door, and has told people to, if they're going to have visitors and stuff, do it on Baldwin so the neighbors don't see it. These are things that go on all the time. And I believe we have text messages from Mr. Munch regarding things when we reported them. The incident with the woman and children inside regarding groceries was brought by a neighbor to parole and probation the following day, and they still hadn't heard anything from the monitors, i.e. Brian. And they were really interested to hear about that because the next day that person was removed because they were not supposed to have visitors. The person that was dropping off mail or picking mail up was not the spouse of the person that was in there, rather his sister. And you're right, she didn't know anything about that. There have been times when people, there was a woman that showed up that had been corresponding with one of the residents via Facebook, and she pulled up in front of my house, and she was sitting there, and one of the other neighbors came over and asked if they could help them, and she said she's meeting somebody. And she said, well, who are you meeting? Well, I'm meeting a guy I was talking with on Facebook. Oh, really? Well, where does he live? She texts into her phone. He's not sure of the address. Okay, where's the house? It's the brown one on the corner. Well, we informed this woman, you should probably go on your way because it's really not a good idea. They shouldn't be doing that. I understand there's no way to enforce that they do not have cell phones, but it is an element in the contract. These things go on all the time. This isn't just complaining about people smoking outside. This is endangering our neighborhood. This is for the safety of children that walk past these people. This is for the safety of people who mistakenly go inside and the reports are not being done and the monitors are not passing along the information.
So Betsy, could I just ask you, have any of the children been approached, or has anyone had to call the police with a?
I have called the police personally twice for Halloween violations, by the way. Yes, kids have gone directly up to the door, and yes, people came out with candy. And yes, the next day those people were removed.
So the system was working the way it was supposed to in that situation? Okay.
In that regard, when OPD has responded quite a bit, OPD has been very responsive for us, even though they aren't able to enforce some of the things that are happening.
Thanks for sharing. Did we have someone else from the neighborhood? If you could give your name and address.
Hello, my name is Jamie O'Brien. I live at 1105 Jefferson Street, so I am kitty corner from this TLP. I have been looking forward to this meeting for a very long time, as many of you are aware. And I prepared a statement, and after hearing some of the things that I have just heard from Rob and Brian, really my statement is just kind of voided out by the inaccuracies that they have just said. So for Brian, we had a meeting that was hosted by Lieutenant Brian Childers last July. And during that meeting, we were adamantly told repeatedly by Lieutenant Childers as well as Joan Cook that there are no visitors allowed at that TLP. They can go and they can come. They are not on house arrest. We are not unreasonable. We are not saying they need to be locked up in chains and can't ever come outside and can't leave the house. We're saying that the sitting on the porch for 8 hours a day, staring at us for everything that we do is unacceptable because we don't know who they are. Mr. Melmans likes to say, well, they could be there for bouncing checks. That's what he usually goes back to. But most of the men that are here are considered sexually violent by the Wisconsin state statute. If you look at them, most of them are 94802s. So for saying that, these are just harmless men is untrue. Some of them, sure, maybe they're there for drugs or robbery, and that's not even our real problem. Our real problem is just with the management and the miscommunications over the years. They keep going back to this monitoring. They've only missed one or two. I just had a phone conversation with Mr. Pites and myself approximately a month ago, and he said that in the 10 years they have not missed one of the 3 checks a day. And I told him that we do have your timesheets through a public records request, and there's plenty of missed checks. He said if there's missed checks, it's a computer glitch. So I've had these printed off. I've had them for a while. If you would like them, you guys can have them. Everything highlighted in pink is they go by a month. So out of all of those months that we have, there are 4 months in there that have less than 5 days that haven't had, they're outside of their contractual obligations. We asked for 10 years, or the last 10 years of their timesheets. They started in 2012, July. There's a whole year in May missing. There are many, many months in between that are missing that weren't handed over. We have been forced to jump through hoops to constantly recontact and re-request forms. It's been a nightmare. Nobody wants to accept any responsibility. From day one, this contract just went in wrong. And by what I mean by that is, so Mr. Roloff, I was contacting your office for the last year and a half because you were a recipient of the community notification and support that was required by the RFB. You're the only one who's still, employed. The other 2 people that received those letters have retired. I was just simply trying to search where the community was notified when this went in, per the contract and the state statute. And we
I'm
can't
sorry,
find any.
what was the item that Mr. Olaf received?
So they're letters of community notification and support that are required for by the Wisconsin state statute 301.08. And I have those 4 letters. Any of my papers that you guys want, you can have my binders right now.
But is that something that the city sends, or that?
This is sent out by the Department of Corrections. So they send 4 letters out. One of them went to the police department, and that was Scott Gruel. The second one was the the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office. So that was Mike Brooks. The third one is to go to the chief elected official, which would have been the mayor, Paul Esslinger at the time, Instead, it went to Mr. Roloff. And then the last one goes to the official newspaper of the city. So that would be the Oshkosh Northwestern. I contacted the Oshkosh Northwestern asking them if they could point me in the direction of where these things would be published. And when I showed the person who works in the legal notices section, she told me that it would go right into the recycling bin. Because that letter, it's not very specific. It does not ask the Northwestern to print, nor does it include any payment to publish. So, you know, so just right from the start, this all just kind of went wrong. All of it was just, you know, it just kind of snowballed from there. And now it's to the point where just nobody wants to accept any responsibility. Everybody we've talked to and tried to come to for help has just pointed their fingers in the other direction. And when I started calling around, I wasn't calling around to be a pest. I wasn't calling around to be, you know, bothersome. I was calling around for help because we have been living there for 10 years. My children have grown up like this. They can't play in their own yards. My daughter hasn't come out the front door. She hasn't stepped in and played in our front yard in the last maybe 4 years. The Oshkosh Police Department is around all the time. I'm sure that they can tell you that. My son, no, he's a different creature. He just, you know, he won't stay still. Bruce is his best friend. Lisa's his best friend, so nothing is gonna kind of keep him from running back and forth across the street. But he's fully aware when he goes outside that he needs to be aware of the brown house where the bad guys are. I see children walking up and down the street every morning. When I would take my children to school in the morning, they would hide their heads because these men would be standing right on the curb and staring down into our car with no shirt, just shorts and a cup of coffee, watching the children walk by. I have been forced to be that crazy lady on the street saying, hey guys, stop. When you're going to school, come over here, like come down this side, you know. Let your parents know that, you know, that's a bad house. If they want to come down and talk to me, I'll let them know. You know, I don't want to scare the children, but I would live with that for the rest of my life if anybody was ever hurt there. And for Mr. Peitzman and Brian and everybody to say that no children have ever been hurt by anybody at that house, I beg to differ. Because my children have suffered for the last 10 years. My family has suffered. Lisa's children have suffered. We are prisoners in our own homes. We've purchased our homes. We're proud of our properties. We've been working very, very hard to make our neighborhood a better, safer place. And every time we turn around, and we were promised a new beginning last July when we had that meeting at the police department. We're gonna do better. We're gonna have better communication. I spoke with Mike Melmans. I'm sure he recalls that conversation, where, you know, we're gonna have better communications. Let's just forget the past. Let's just start over. It's gonna be better. We're gonna do better. It'll be better. We're all gonna work together. We'll go forward. While we weren't thrilled with that idea, we said, okay, because we're not unreasonable. If you're gonna step up, you're gonna take responsibility, you're gonna manage the property better, okay, let's see where this goes. That didn't even last a month. And we are no better off a year and a half later than we were when we were promised a new beginning. So I don't wanna hear, we're gonna do better, we're gonna take better care of this, we're gonna fix that, we're gonna fix this. We tried that already. We've been there, we've done that. It's not getting better. They're not gonna take accountability. He gives the men broken lawn furniture. The city of Oshkosh pays him, Department of Corrections pays him $147,000 every 2 years for that property. You all just saw the photos of that property. That is not fair to the men that he's supposed to be servicing and providing this great home for and this stepping stone into the community. Per their contract, they're supposed to be giving them help with employment searches. They're supposed to be helping them learn budgeting. And to be a successful completion of the program, per their contract, it states they're supposed to have $1,000 in their savings account. I'd ask Mr. Munch how many of those have $1,000. It's not 80%. So everything that's in their contract, they pick and choose constantly what they want, when they want it. When it's gonna work for them, then that's what they say. When it's not gonna work for them, then they change the rules. It's never ending. Mr. Pitson, I called Rob myself, and I said, what special precautions do you have in place to ensure that this man doesn't cut off his bracelet again? His MO is breaking and entering in the middle of the night, midnight to 4 a.m., and raping females while they sleep. I have a 13-year-old daughter who won't open her bedroom window, even in the middle of the summer when it's very, very hot, because she's afraid that they're gonna get into her bedroom. He assured me that they were gonna step up the monitoring and that wasn't gonna happen. Well, it did, and we weren't even notified, knowing that that was a special concern of mine. I found out about it because the Oshkosh Northwestern posted his photo on their most wanted list. And when I asked Ms. Cook about it, down at probation and parole, she stood with folded arms and said, well, last time he took off anyways. He's probably not even around here. Something to that effect. You know, it's just, we tried to be good neighbors. We've tried to be understanding. It's been there for 10 years, and we're 10 years out. And it's just now that we're like, we're done. We need a break. This can't happen to any other children. No other children deserve to grow up this way. No other residents deserve to feel this way in their own homes where they can't utilize their own properties. You have to pull your car in backwards after Christmas because you don't want anybody seeing what you're taking in and out of your car. And if you got it's just, I'm sure you all can imagine. If you really sit and think about it, you all know. I don't have to explain it to you. Everybody here understands. And those of you that are parents, I hope you just take 2 seconds to really think about it. What it's like, not even for the parents, but just for these kids to grow up like this. So for them to say nobody's been hurt, I disagree. I strongly disagree that nobody's been hurt by this place. Because they have. And every time I talk to Mr. Peitzman about it, he's very quick to turn things around on me, make me feel like the bad person. When I said, a woman left your property who was so high that she couldn't even walk a block. She sat in the gutter in front of my house for over an hour in the middle of a rainstorm because she couldn't make it any further. He said, wow, well that is just horrible. That's just really, really terrible that somebody would actually take a photo of another human being in that condition. I said, everything you say to this guy, he's got a very slick answer. He's quick to turn it around, and he's quick to deflect. Mr. Munch has been no help. We have gone to him multiple times with concerns, and all he does is belittle and argue, and we have text messages, we have photos, like I said, you can have everything. We have every email that's ever been sent back and forth.
So I think we've gotten probably a lot of information and appreciate very much you folks sharing your experiences. And I think we have some council questions and answers that we'd also like to discuss. There's a stack of emails here too that we all received, and just really appreciate you folks coming out and sharing.
Can I say one last thing? This will be a second and a half. Just a second and a half. And that was a very good speech, Jamie, but I want to go back to the contract between Trinity and the DOC. That contract has been breached time and time again. I think it's time to terminate it. Mr. Mullman has that ability to terminate it and look somewhere else. Thank you.
If I could have your name and address, please.
My name is Elizabeth Schlake. I reside at 1216 Jefferson Street. Yes, I'm one of the fortunate ones that doesn't live directly across from, but just down the street. My daughter would walk past it before we even knew what the heck this place was, because it was done secretly and no notification. Would come home in tears because there was gentlemen outside of that property catcalling and making disgusting remarks to her. Of course, I didn't call the police because I didn't know what it was at the time. She had to resort to going around a whole 2 blocks to get home so she wouldn't have to drive or walk past that place any longer. So yes, things do happen there.
Thank you. All right. The citizen statements, and I think there have been attempts to answer some of the citizens' questions, but I'm not sure if that's been completely.
Chief has some questions.
You have
the
some
public
cards
side.
that came in? Okay.
Yeah.
So knowing that this is oftentimes a very charged type scenario when we have sex offender notification meetings, we have a process where citizens can provide questions, and then they're able to articulate exactly what their question is, and we're able to hopefully answer those questions. So we kind of use that process that we use in SBN meetings to facilitate some of the questions from the audience for answers. So I'll read the questions, and they may be from different department members or those who are viewing online to answer those questions. Some of them don't relate to this address, and we'll address those questions outside of this meeting, the different address altogether. Some of them have already been answered. So the first question, which I believe has already been asked and answered, does DOC parole update the supervisors on conditions inside the TOP when they're inside dropping off or removing a person? I believe that question was already asked and answered. But this next question, was a review of the facility done before contract was renewed? If so, what were the findings? I guess that would be a planning answer more than our answer.
Did you mean the contract inside the house?
The renewal of the contract.
That would be to the DOC.
Yeah.
They're contractually obligated to do a walkthrough prior to redoing.
Yeah.
So that would be a DOC question.
Yes.
So do we have someone that'd like to speak from DOC on that?
So it's Mike. I will take a shot at this question. I heard the general question. I didn't hear some of the side discussion that occurred, but the general question about the renewal. When the contracts are renewed, we take a look at the performance of the contract over the previous term. Did they meet the conditions of the contract? Are they timely in their response to DOC? Are their invoices correct? Were the services provided to an acceptable level? We take a look at staffing patterns, were there long periods of staff vacancies? So there's many different factors that go into that, but ultimately I make the recommendation for that contract to be renewed. And then we have staff down in Madison who are more of the contract specialists. Those individuals execute the renewal process and offer the vendor a chance to renew or to deny wanting to continue with the contract at that time.
But I think the question was whether or not a review of the house, like, did you mean a review inside the house? Yeah, that's what they're asking is, does anybody walk through the house before that renewal is done?
I myself have been in that property. I suspect that our supervisors have been in that property from time to time as well. And in those occasions that I was there, I do not believe, I would have to go back and check notes, but I do not believe I saw anything of significant concern. When we take a look at our inspections, we typically make sure that there's the running water, the furnaces are running, that the general conditions are habitable. It's different people view different things to different standards. And in my own opinion, when I walked through there, I did not see the same information that was presented at tonight's meeting.
Mr. Davis, question for you. Does the TLP, is it subject to our mandatory inspection program, given the relationship here? I mean, are the residents of 1105 Jefferson considered renters that have the option of that participation in our rental inspection program?
There's two different elements to the inspection program. One is complaint-based, and any tenant can make a complaint to our department, and we'll investigate that complaint regarding the living code violations regarding code that the city enforces. And then that's the complaint-based, and then we also have the proactive inspections. That's when the city would send a letter out to any tenants asking if they'd like to have the property inspected, and I'd have to see if 1105 Jefferson is even in one of our areas that we would send that letter out, because we've only identified 4 sections of the city to do that.
And you probably wouldn't happen to know if there have been any inspection requests, complaint-based, would you, on this property?
Asked earlier this year when this came up, and 1105 didn't receive any of those complaints at that point, but I haven't looked recently.
Okay, okay.
There was a complaint for Bethel in 2016, that's the only thing that's on the record.
That sounds about right.
Okay, thank you.
Next question, I believe had already been asked and answered, is who is charged with informing probation and parole of issues at the TLP? And finally, the last question is, if Green Bay can have an ordinance, why can't Oshkosh? And I'm assuming that's the sex offender ordinance.
I'm sorry, what was the first part of that question?
If Green Bay can have an ordinance, why can't Oshkosh?
Oh, okay.
And I believe that would relate to a sex offender ordinance. And I know that City Attorney Lawrenson spoke to that earlier.
Certainly. Thank you for sharing.
And just for notification, Ron, we can speak to you about those 2 addresses.
Please?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'll speak to you outside of the meeting here. That's all the questions I have.
Okay, all right. So we're at council question and answers. Did other council members have additional questions that they wanted to ask? I guess I'd like to start. And maybe this is a question for City Attorney Lawrence and or Mr. Lyons, Mr. Davis. Can we require local management? Is that something that we're able to request? It sounds like some of these things sound really similar to what we had many discussions about with absentee landlords and property conditions. And I'm just curious if that's even applicable in this situation.
I could say for rental properties, we do have a registration program, so at least we know who the contacts are, but there's nothing that dictates that there must be a local owner of
No,
rental
not a
properties.
local owner, but some kind of local management. And Councilmember Allison Asby, maybe you, did you have your hand up?
I did, but we can wait till you're done.
Could you repeat the question?
Oh,
now,
I'm
please?
sorry. Not necessarily local ownership, but local, like, management. Are we able to?
For the registration program, we do ask for a contact. They don't have to be local. In theory, they could be located anywhere in the country, but at least we have a contact person. We talked about having a local contact, but that didn't become part of the code.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, I think there's a couple things. I think it's both some comments and I think also, perhaps a question, because I think, what we want to do is we want to provide an environment, obviously for our residents who have invested in their homes and their neighborhoods. We want them to have an opportunity for success for themselves, for their families. And, I also understand, that we also have those that have been incarcerated that are transferring out, and for the reasons that were stated, they may not have friends and family that they can go to, and thus the need for the TLP. And obviously, we don't want to be so restrictive and provide an environment, because it is to our benefit, both residents and law enforcement, to know exactly where sex offenders, for example, are living and working. Because if we don't do that, we don't know where they are, and we certainly don't want to create that at all. But, I guess my question is how can we do better? And when I say we do better, how can we as the city, as well as the state, do better? Is there a way, and what are the steps or the things that we need to do in order to say, rather than picking a neighborhood that has young families, or regarding if it's more of established with, more of our established citizens that, maybe don't have young children but might have grandchildren, is there a way that maybe we can identify somewhere within the city that we can collaboratively work together and to be able to get them what they need, the transportation programs, different things like that, without having to buy a house within a neighborhood or near a school? And that's just a question that I've been asking, and I can't seem to get answered, from anyone. So that, that would be helpful, is what can we do? Is there a way to look at where are some possible sites and move in that direction, so that perhaps down the line, rather than having the house at Jefferson, or rather there's a house in Middle Village or other areas, that, at some point that house then, those residents can go somewhere else. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen today, tomorrow, or even 6 months from now. But what can we do? Who do we start? Where do we start? Where do we go to? And again, the neighbors have said it themselves, and I've heard this from other parts of the city as well. Nobody's saying that there's nowhere for them to go, but is there a better way that we can do it? So, that's one of the questions, that I have. And the other thing is too, is if we are identifying that maybe perhaps what it sounds like is with the homes that we have, especially the one on Jefferson, if you do look at it from the outside, it doesn't really blend in well with the neighborhood and the neighbors that are trying to do something with their property. What does it take? Does it take additional money? Does it take volunteer? I don't know what it is, but to make the outside of the property maybe perhaps more neighborhood friendly, as well as the inside, because I'm sure it's probably comes down to a budget issue. But if you look at the pictures that, clearly we just seen of this particular house, I don't know that it's necessarily exactly furnished or in a state in which breeds success. So that's my question, is how do we move forward? Obviously recognizing that there's frustrations of our neighborhoods within the city. And then my second question is when you look at it, and I understand that the numbers change differently per day, but when you have, say, perhaps as of today, 567 within our county, persons within our county, and 285 of them, which is 50.25%, are in 2 of our zip codes within the county, I also find that a little bit problematic. And while I agree we should certainly take our fair share, in helping, how do we not completely overwhelm particular neighborhoods and particular zip codes, and quite frankly, the city of Oshkosh? And in no way, shape, or form am I saying, well, it can be in your city and not ours. I'm not saying that. Clearly, we've stepped up to the plate, but we're not the only municipality or village or township that's here. And again, I understand that transportation and programs are an issue, but again, if you have 285 out of 567 in 2 zip codes within the same city limits, as an elected official, I would have to say that's a bit frustrating. But again, I mean it in the spirit of collaboration. So those are just my thoughts and my comments, Madam Mayor.
And thanks for sharing that.
Can I respond to that?
Who's speaking, please?
It's Joan Cook from Corrections.
Yes, Joan.
DOC would love to collaborate with the city to find where is the best place for those returning from prison, whether they be a burglar or whether they be a sex offender. We would love to collaborate so that we can find additional places for people to go.
I'll just respond to that from personal experience. Our neighborhood was told the same thing 5 years ago. We came to DOC. We had the state reps here. We had regional folks. It was Chief Groyle, Senator Gudex, Gordon Hintz, the mayor at that time. We had similar concerns, and echoing Councilmember Allison Osby's sentiments that, our concern at that time was the concentration in 54901. And we too had a similar forum like this. It wasn't a TLP, it's a non-conforming rooming house, several of which are in a very concentrated area. And we too were concerned about more the a combination of things, not just in relation to safety, because we heard the same things from DOC and probation and parole and the police department. You're safer knowing where folks are. What wasn't heard or listened to at that time, and apparently, yet again, is the concentration in a small area, 177 of which those 567 are in 54901, one of the denser areas in the smaller quadrant of the city. And we had asked the DOC to consider looking at dispersion as opposed to a ban ordinance. Well, we talked to the city about an ordinance, but it wasn't saying, they couldn't live here. It was, where is it best? And here we are, I find 5 years later, having the same conversation. And this is a place that has oversight and is getting paid, significantly to provide these successful steps. So, I'm also a little bit skeptical to hear that you'd love to work with us, because we've heard that same thing 5 years ago. Just my 2 cents, Councilmember Peschel.
Sure. Just some general questions here, and I think I'm going to start with Attorney Lawrenson. The neighbors have advised us that they would like the council to look into an ordinance that monitors the placement of TLPs within our community. When you made your comments earlier, it was not related to those aspects. It was more related to where sex offenders may or may not be able to live within our city if we created an ordinance. And so if we could specifically address that, either you or I think Mark might be ready to address that as well. So, but
I'll probably defer to Mark, because I think that would be a zoning issue. We don't treat this, we treat it as a residential use right now.
So let me ask a different question then. If it's not a legal question, what zones within our city or our community can there be TLPs?
So really it comes down into our current ordinance, the differentiation between services provided and no services provided. If services are being provided, we have a number of land uses in certain zoning districts that allow that. If there are no services being provided, our current zoning ordinance regulates it as a family. You could have up to 3 unrelated people living in that unit, whether it's 3 college kids, 3 friends, or 3 individuals from a situation like this. The current zoning ordinance does not differentiate between those types of people in a residential living unit.
Councilmember Peschel, can I just clarify the question you were asking? Were you asking about the zoning, or were you asking about a potential ordinance? Okay,
So,
because there's some of these
because I know right
buffers.
now we can do this in our city. That's a zoning answer, which you just answered. But then the real question is, can we can we regulate them through ordinance? Can we kick in certain things that we want TLPs to do within our community if they set up shop?
We would have to investigate to see exactly what criteria we could use to do that, because it has to be in the zoning ordinance, has to be land use based. So we're gonna have to be able to differentiate how that land use functions differently.
Okay.
But that would apply to all TLPs, not just related to DOC.
Potentially, we would have to do some investigating of what case law is out there.
And I guess to City Attorney Lawrenson's reference earlier, laws have changed. I do see, and I want to acknowledge that we received a handout. I'm trying to figure out who it's from. It just says Jefferson Street. TLP 1105 Jefferson at gmail.com. Is there anybody here who claims that email address? Oh, okay, all right. That had some 2019 Wisconsin Town Law Conference on dumping grounds and banishment sex offender residency regulation in Wisconsin. City Attorney Lawrence, and they reference a couple of cases here, and I don't know if those are the ones that you were referencing also. State versus Preston Rentamaki, and local control over sex offender residency. Did you get a copy of this?
I don't have a copy of that.
Okay, all right. So did all the council members get this? City manager, did you get this?
Yeah,
I'm
I
just
received
going
a
to
copy
pass
of it.
this over, my copy over
I
to
give Lynn my copy.
City Attorney. Not that we expect you to read it on the spot or anything.
I can get a copy from
Okay.
the city manager tomorrow.
Yes, Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, Mr. Lyons, can you clarify the distinction between services being provided and services not being provided?
So right now, the way the ordinance dictates them is services provided is actual on-site services. It's food being provided, counseling services being provided, some sort of educational service being provided on-site where someone's coming in doing training or providing actual counseling services, or is it just a place for an individual to live?
I'm just, so if there was something in the DOC contract with that place that said they had to have job training, which is what we were told.
For example, as they referenced their initial comments, when services get provided, then there's licensing requirements from the state. Those are what help differentiate between those two different options.
So that can, I guess my question now goes to the DOC. Because I've seen a contract, it's not a current contract, but from my understanding, elements that Mr. Lyons just talked about, those are part of that contract. I saw a contract that specifically said budget workshops, budget trainings and such like that. And so my question then becomes, as a city councilman, there's an expectation that the DOC is going to incorporate these types of trainings and enhancements in the lives to people in our community. And how are we measuring that? Is there data on that? Do you keep track of that information? That stuff is important when we start to measure the benefit of these types of facilities within our community. You gave us a general, I think Trinity gave us a general number that 80% of the inhabitants of the facility are gone within 60 to 90 days. That's just one measurement right there. But are there other measurements that you can provide us that can convey the success of this property and the success of the TLP within our community?
I guess
general question.
I'm not sure who that gets directed to.
So on behalf of the contract, we do keep track of demographic information. We do keep track of like duration of stay. So entry date, completion date. We have data for reason of discharge, successful completions. But as far as keeping track of actual services, budgeting, life skills, different shopping, that type of stuff, those services that might be delivered within the house. I don't have data for that.
But it's part of your contract. So is that something you're not requiring Trinity to provide data on? Even if it's part of their contract?
We provide the data to DOC every month. We've been doing it since probably the last 7 or 8 years since requested. We give them a date that they came into the house and a date that they left.
But again, the provision of the service we provide are really not any licensed services at all. It's essentially the monitoring, observing, documenting, and reporting. If I don't know what contract you're looking at, it's possible it's an old contract or something that pertains to a different type of service, because we don't provide everyone with budgeting skills or job search. People are responsible to do their own job searching and coordinate that with their agent.
So let me put that a different way. I misspoke. Okay. Let me acknowledge that I misspoke. But I'm actually looking at a bid specifications.
That is the contract.
So we'll call it a contract, we'll call it a bid, but I'm going off of what's in here. It specifically says provide opportunities to learn budgeting skills. This is what Trinity had to give the DOC to be able to get the contract. So, and what I hear the DOC saying that this is not information that you want from them. It's not information that you're asking for them. It makes me concerned that budgeting skills aren't as important in the success of these gentlemen that live here. That it's not important enough to be able to measure that success. So why would we expect Trinity to provide that information if the DOC isn't going to expect it when it's provided to them within their contract or their request to provide those services in our community? So I know I'm speaking very generally. You can respond in whatever manner that you want, but this is a concern to me, and it's a concern to me because it's a concern to my neighbors, my community that I represent, and they have expectations, and a company has expressed what their expectation is, and the DOC is not holding them accountable to it. So
I don't know if it's helpful hi, this is Rob. I don't know if it's helpful. I think that the bid, the only budgeting line about budgeting that I recall in that has to do with overseeing. For the first 2 weeks, we provide food, staples, because people are just coming out of jail. They don't have money yet. And then they are responsible to provide it. If I recall correctly, that line about budgeting is about overseeing purchasing their food. In other words, allowing residents to own their own food so they can, it's jargon, so they could have the opportunity for to provide for their own nutrition and budgeting skills. I think, if I recall correctly, I don't think that was intended as a specific lesson planning on budgeting, but I might be thinking of the wrong bid. There's a lot of bids out there, and I know some looked at some that aren't current. So, however I can help in that to explain that aspect, I'd be happy to.
Could I just stop things for a minute, because I want to ask the city attorney here, what mechanism is the city council to be involved with the handling of the contract? Is that a civil matter that would be handled between the folks that are in the?
Because we are not a party to that contract.
Right, and I guess I don't want to disregard what Councilmember Paschal is bringing up. I don't want to disregard what neighbors are bringing up, but if there's disputes on contracts, that the city's not involved in. I'm not sure what we can do there. What I feel like we can do is discuss some next steps maybe on where this goes as to whether council is interested in pursuing modifying anything in terms of the land use or an ordinance. And I don't, like I said, I don't want to disrespect your time. We're not going to be able to answer all those questions tonight. I don't think they're going to be able to answer all those questions tonight. If there's a dispute over contracts, I just feel like we're kind of getting off course. Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, I guess this is for planning and the city attorney. I would just be interested, right, this question about what services are or not being provided. Just be curious to see if we have any leeway in terms of defining it as a place where services are provided, because if we have documented evidence that they are,
Yeah,
perhaps
I
we have some
can-
leeway there. And I don't expect you to answer this.
Yeah, I can dig into the ordinance
Yeah.
somewhere. Usually when we talk about services, they're a little more substantial things where
Okay.
you have, specific hours or consulting or like a cook that's there making food, providing
Okay,
stuff
well-
like that. But I'll dig into the ordinance so
Yeah.
we can get just
Well,
specifics.
and generally, to the mayor's point, I mean, yes, personally, I'd love to see a better understanding of what our current powers are, and maybe how creative we can be, and then, some better understanding of what we could do without exposing ourselves legally.
Councilmember Allison Osby.
Thank you, and I think, Mr. Ford, I think that's an excellent point. I think, what I would like to do is I'd like to take Miss Cook, Joan Cook, I believe her name was.
Yes.
Yeah, and, the appreciation and the eagerness right away to say that, absolutely, you'd like to start a dialogue and work collaboratively together and start a relationship. And so, I certainly appreciate that. And I think that's a real positive, and I think we should really kind of see where we can go with that. And so I don't know how, Joan, it's best for us to work together. I don't know if you have that suggestion this evening, or if that's maybe something perhaps that, we sleep on for a day or two. And if it's possible somehow to get your contact information, I certainly, would be happy with staff or with other council members, to begin that relationship. So thank you for offering that up right away.
Thank you. City Manager Roloff has my contact information.
Okay.
All right, anybody else? Councilmember Peschel.
Sure. So, I guess I am too very interested in continuing the dialogue to see where the city may play a role in regards to the placement of TLPs within our community. And so I just want that to be, I guess, on the record in regards to that. Now, also for the record, I want to say that even though I've been a little critical and a little hard tonight, I believe that there is a benefit to these types of facilities within our community. But I also believe that there's probably a good place and not a good, and not, there's good places and bad places for that. And I think that, I think that's the important part, is trying to find the best spot that works for our community and works for the people that will be using those facilities, so that they can have their lives enriched and moved on to becoming fully involved community members to the best of their abilities and wants. And I think that should be our goal, is to find an inclusive way to incorporate people in our community in doing this. And so I'll stop there.
I just want to add a little bit to that, and that is, sometimes we see in our warming shelter folks who don't have this as an option, who have similar circumstances. Sometimes when the warming shelters close down, they are, living out along the Riverwalk, camped. We have, folks in cars, in parks, and that. And I don't think any one of us can sit here and say that we've never made a mistake, and not think about the fact that if somebody makes, a big mistake, that's all they're defined by. And what I heard from the neighbors tonight was, they're not saying that they don't want these folks to have a place to live. They're just asking for more accountability and better management. So, City Manager, can you follow up with the continued?
In terms of what, the items that the council talked about, can we regulate TLPs in our zoning code? That's a general, but we'll go into more detail on that. And then, what can we do with the DOC in locating TLPs? There is a state law that says they have to notify us. We were notified. We provide comments. We provided comments. But, at the end of the day.
So when you say we provided comments.
Yeah, back in 2010, we did provide some comment. In fact, Ms. O'Brien, when she provided some information, I found the documents that Mr. Burch had provided. I had to really recall this because I didn't recall it at all, but I saw the documentation. Mr. Burch expressed some concerns about the location, but at the end of the day, the Department of Corrections is required only to notify us, and they can certainly take our comments. Ultimately, they chose to locate it here. Ms. Cook indicated she'd be willing to work with us, but this is about future TLPs. They're grandfathered in, even as Mr. Lyons explained,
Right.
even though technically if they were building it and doing it today, they'd be limited to 6, but they're grandfathered in. They're a non-conforming use. They're permitted to go 8. If they were to locate somewhere else, they'd be under the new rules of 6. Is there something we can do? I don't know the answer, and Ms. Lawrenson was not asked that question until tonight. So, we can do some digging. I don't know the answer, so I can't tell you. But certainly a lot of issues that the residents raised were contractual issues, and I think the DOC heard you, and I think we invited some state reps. They may be listening in, or I'm not sure. At least one indicated they were going to be listening in. So, some of that may be between them and the state, but somebody asked me, well, why are we doing this if we don't have a role? And I said, we want to help facilitate because these are our residents, and the council cares deeply about this issue and wants to make sure that if this facility is going to be in that community, and I told Ms. Gundy, it's going to be tough for us to get rid of it. We don't have the authority to do it, but we certainly care enough that we want to make this facility successful, yet keep the community safe.
All right, so this will conclude the workshop part, unless there's anything else.
In accordance with council's direction on workshops, within 30 days, I'll be reporting back to you. So I would imagine by probably the last meeting in October or the first meeting in November, I'll count my 30 days. I'll be reporting back to council. I'll update the status of outstanding issues, and that's where council can track that. And that outstanding issues, I think the residents, some of you have been looking at that, so I appreciate you reading these things because I do work on them. So if you could just keep an eye on that, we'll keep everybody posted.
All right. Given that we've gone over 2 hours, would council like a 5-minute recess?
Yes, please.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
5 minutes.
The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Oshkosh Common Council is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV.
Regarding our special meeting, the September 29th Oshkosh Common Council, please take the roll.
Mugrower, Erickson,
Here.
Heschel,
Here?
Ford,
Here.
Allison Osby. Here. Krause,
Here.
Palmieri,
Here.
present 6.
Deputy Mayor Krause, would you lead us in the invocation? Oh, sorry, Lindsay. Councilmember Erickson, would you lead us in the invocation followed by the pledge?
We ask for guidance tonight as we begin this meeting. May all those who participate in our discussions and our decisions reflect the values that we cherish in the city.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, we have one item on the agenda tonight, and this is just simply a council discussion and direction to city manager for future agenda items. We are looking at a potential joint meeting with the Winnebago County Health Department, Chamber of Commerce, Oshkosh Convention Center and Visitors Bureau, Greater Oshkosh Economic Development Corporation, the Tavern League, and Council regarding keeping businesses open while reducing community spread during the pandemic. And thank you for wording that so full, City Manager Roloff. So we asked for a meeting to ask for a meeting. And what would that be, a meta meeting?
Yeah.
It's not uncommon that council have had joint legislative meetings in the past with representatives, and I believe this was supposed to also include some of our other representatives, Mr. Hintz, Mr. Ryan, Mr. Schra. We have done that typically once or twice a year.
Well, at one time, we were doing it once or twice a year.
Pre-COVID. Everything's pre-COVID. So Councilmember Ford brought this up, and then, of course, City Manager offered to include the Tavern League. Many of those folks, we've heard from since that last meeting. I don't know about you guys, but I've gotten a number of emails and phone calls.
Well, this was an outcome because of the mayor at the last meeting had asked that we put some type of occupancy restriction, and in lieu of that, I think it was, how about if we engage, and I think that was where the mayor and Councilmember Ford.
What are the options? And I'll just let you lead.
I can lay out my thinking on this, since sorry I got you all here today. But yeah, at our previous meeting, at the end of the meeting, the idea of an ordinance limiting occupancy for some of our businesses was floated as a concept for future discussion. And after the meeting, I shared some thoughts with the mayor and with the city manager, and I suggested that before we do anything going down that road, we need to have some type of workshop with the business community. We want to understand, and we need to understand what they're already doing in terms of their COVID response, what changing occupancy rates or any type of policy change, what it would do to them, do to their business, then understand what they need from us. And my hope is that we as a city can empower the business community to be a partner with us on the COVID response. I think we need to be seen as collaborators. We need to be collaborators and not be perceived, rightfully or wrongfully, as dictating to the business community, because we're not going to have an effective response to this very real pandemic if we don't have the individuals that are on the front lines working with us. So to that end, I'd love to see some type of workshop to kick off the discussion, but even moving forward, I'd love to see us go down the road of a local COVID business task force. So it's a model that's been used in other places. I was making some phone calls today. But basically, it's a temporary committee, something that would be tied to the emergency, be comprised of business owners and their representatives. And it's something where they can advise us on those key points that I mentioned. What are they doing already? What do they need? And what would anything we're discussing, what would the impact be on them? Because right now, we hear from them, and we float ideas, and that's great, that's our role. But I think we need to formalize their role in this process if we are really going to be seen as true partners. Now, is it perfect? No, it's absolutely not perfect. But it's a structure that at the very least gives business a formal voice and facilitates cooperation, because I think we have a common goal here. And I think that if we use a policy instrument that is too blunt without getting the process right, we risk having all kinds of impacts that we don't know about. So I like the idea of a structure we can work with them to make progress on this goal. So that was my thinking.
Well, and since that time, what's been really fantastic is, that was put out there as just one idea, not let's do this. It was, what can we do? Here's one possibility. What are the others out there? And I think that has started to, bring some conversations forth. A young person who works in the service industry contacted me and said, I don't want to lose my job. He says, we're closed down currently. you know, might you look at closing bars earlier? You know, he said he himself feels like they should all be closed down because there's this unfairness amongst the tavern community and the restaurant community based on who's doing what. And, you know, some feel like they are following responsible practices and that it's not fair that other entities are not doing that. And I think that it fits nicely to consider having this discussion, including some of those entities so that they can give the input about what has been working. I mean, I don't think anybody has any kind of magical thinking, magic answers about what this is, but I think we can all agree that this has been a really long emergency, and we're like now at the point we thought we were going to be, you know, earlier on. And so with what we're seeing in the community and what our residents are asking from us is there's a big divide. Some are asking for do everything you can to slow this down, and others are saying do nothing. As a matter of fact, I had an individual call today who said the council should not be having this conversation. They actually believed that just by having the conversation that it was making the problem worse. So a widespread of interests and approaches, but I think we can all agree the emergency is not over, and it's been rather heightened in recent weeks. So sooner rather than later, I don't know that it necessarily needs recommending a special ad hoc committee, but rather those who are willing and passionate to be part of that discussion about what could be agreed upon as a way to stay open and stay safe would be welcome. Councilmember Allison Osby.
So I guess my question is, because obviously, you know, Councilmember Ford, you know, stated where his position was, where he wanted to have, you know, a discussion, which sounds kind of more of like a open discussion and more information based is kind of what I gathered there, and some dialogue. Maybe one business could learn something for another, or just informing the public and others like us specifically what's going on. I think we have to be transparent in what exactly is the council's objective, because I'm kind of hearing a little bit of a different tone between the two of you, where I'm hearing, well, is what you're saying, Mayor, that you're looking to have some other modification in which is not a guideline, but perhaps a rule or some type of a ordinance or mandate? Because I think that's what the businesses want to know. I think when it got thrown out last week, there was just kind of this assumption that there was going to be additional rules and regulations. So what is the intent? We have to be honest. And if that's the direction that this council wants to go, well, then we need to allow the business community, and not just bars and restaurants. I mean, we cannot, we should not and cannot villainize a particular sector of our businesses. I mean, there's retail, there's service, there's manufacturing, there's bars, there's restaurants. So I guess, you know, that's kind of my question. I mean, I'm always up for discussion, and I always think dialogue is always a good way to go to make sure that everybody's on the same page. But, you know, what is this council hoping for an end result?
Certainly, and I think that, you know, again, that statement of, you know, putting it on a future agenda, I mean, we were at that time considering a citywide mask ordinance, and we were talking about whether or not we would be more restrictive, or if we were going to just immediately be with the face-wide mask ordinance, if that was just going to be immediately, what's the word? Repealed. And, you know, at one point it seemed like, well, perhaps, you know, this all goes towards the same effort, and that is reducing the spread. And could we add that on? And city attorney said that needed to be a separate discussion if it's anything other than masks, because that's what we were dealing with that night. So that's why I offered that as one piece, not that this is the way it should be, but one piece of a discussion that could be had. And, you know, whether it's sticks, carrots, or everybody just coming together voluntarily singing Kumbaya. And, but what I'm hearing is there's a divide, especially between some of the neighborhood taverns and some of they're calling them, you know, the college bars in the practices. And that you folks have probably gotten a number of calls too with regards to restaurants. And that this is kind of a driving area. We have the New York Times. By the way, everybody should know, New York Times is going to be here tomorrow taking pictures and interviewing folks. They want to know why Oshkosh is number 3 on this list and what's going on. No, what? You're saying number 2?
Yeah.
Oh, did
tell
we
us
move
short.
up? That's not the reason why we want them to be here, right? So I think we can all agree that if there is a way that we can reduce the spread, that we should make that effort. And perhaps it doesn't happen and we don't get agreement or voluntary participation. I think we all know that there's not anything that's enforceable by our police department, and probably with the capacity constraints at the county health department, not enforceable even by them. So it's a matter of asking the community to say what they feel needs to be done for us to stay open and stay safe. Yeah.
And if I may say, and I get the logic to that, I honestly do, and I'm not even disagreeing with that, but we get county-wide numbers. We've yet to get specific Oshkosh numbers. That's frustrating, because the county is going up, but what does that mean in Oshkosh? And then within Oshkosh, where is the cluster? Is it truly throughout the entire community, or is it perhaps in one area?
Census Tract 5 has the highest numbers. Census Tract 7 follows.
Okay, and 5 is?
5 is from
right
the
around
river up to like Irving-ish, a little bit east of Maine, over to roughly Jackson. Actually, there may be a little dogleg off on Marion Road.
And so
then
is that,
7 is the university.
so is that, you know, residential, is that considered, you know, student housing? You know, what makes up the bulk of it? You know, so those are just some things, and I think it goes back to the incident Tuesday, you know, in which, you know, we did have the head of our health department who was here during the incident. And at that point in time, there wasn't any active enforcement with that, and we had somebody right there and then. You know, so again, that's where I'm trying to understand what, if we're putting, because what I'm hearing in a roundabout way, and I don't think anybody's coming out and saying it, what I'm kind of getting the impression is that, yes, there does want to be some type of restrictions, or like you said, you know, the carrot or, you know, the stick analogy, you know, in order for people to enforce. I guess my question is, are we actually changing the minds of those that aren't complying, and are we going to continue to hurt those that are and the businesses that are? That's my question, because we've had the same messaging for months and months and months, and we're still having non-compliance. So is it that everybody's numb to the same message, or to what I said a few months ago was, do we need to have some type of a campaign in which Mr. Roloff said we had full access to Mr. Radig and you know, Oshkosh Media to maybe take a different approach. And Mr. Ford and I had a conversation about approaches today, and I think what he's talking about. So if we, what I think is I think it's been, and I'll probably get blasted for saying this, but it has been Armageddon ever since March. You know, whether it was a holiday, first it was Easter, it was Memorial Day, July 4th, the Sandbar Bash, And now we are at a time in which numbers are significantly going up. But if we beat people with the same message, are they just going to continue to ignore it? And are we really going to change the minds of those that aren't complying? I don't know, but those are questions. But I think rather the people who do want us to do something that really enforces, or not enforces, I guess that's not the right word, but to, I guess, have a ordinance or a mandate or more restrictions, they deserve to know that. And for the businesses and those that have to comply, we need to be honest with our intentions today, not a week from now, 2 weeks from now. I think that's only going to compound the problem. And I think perhaps the same person that you talked to, Mayor, is maybe somebody that I talked to. I'm not 100% sure, but kind of there was that same sentiment, is that, you know, every time that we bring it up, it does create for those businesses, the school district, the college, it does seem to have people kind of pull back. So I just want to make sure that whatever we're doing, we're fully intentional, we're fully communicative with our intent. Nobody likes to be surprised. So, you know, that's, I guess, I would like to know from the other council members besides, you know, the mayor and Mr. Ford, what their intent would be if we move forward.
Yeah, the intent is to have a meeting with those folks and discuss what the options are, and also to be, you know, advised by legal, you know, what we could do. And as I understand it, having spoken with a county board supervisor yesterday, you know, there were some questions asked about why we decided to not publish the names of businesses that had, I don't know, 2 or more COVID positives. And it wasn't a we. I corrected the message and said that was not city council, because someone was like pointing the finger at us. I said, well, we didn't decide that. And then they wanted to know who did decide that, because other counties and other cities to the north of us are publishing those numbers. And so I was just trying to find that information for them. The county supervisor that I spoke with didn't have the answer. Thought it could have potentially come from, you know, their corporate counsel's, you know, interpretation or something. But, you know, there are those who want to praise the establishments that they go to that are, you know, doing safe practices. But they're begging us right now, do something. And we're sitting here having a conversation about whether or not we should have a meeting in public to gather those ideas. And I appreciate what you're asking. It's not an intention to throw down, you know, these overly burdensome restrictions. Nobody wants to see businesses close down. But people want to know that there is some way that this community can recover. And that means slowing this virus down. I mean, that's what I'm getting all week.
Mm-hmm.
Deputy Mayor Krause and then Councilmember Peschel.
Thank you. I think this kind of meeting with all these partners coming in and discussing is a great idea. It's about equity. It's about ownership. I think the schools have shown ownership and part of the blame. I think the restaurants have. They've reduced the amount of people coming in. They sectioned off tables, which they might be able to fill at some restaurants. Maybe some haven't. I've spoken to a couple restaurant owners and they said they have 40% attendance compared to what they used to have. I mean, how low do we go on that to reduce the curve? I think people are making good judgments at these restaurants. They're not going if it's not safe, if they feel like it's not safe. The schools have shut down. Is that fair equity ownership compared to taverns? I mean, is it business as usual for taverns? Where's their ownership in this? Where's their equity in suffering? I want a fair discussion with some of these individuals, and I feel like certain people are not going to take ownership, and everybody has to take ownership on this to succeed and to buy into what we have to do and the suffering we have to do. we all shut down a couple months ago and everybody suffered. And now it feels like people are saying, it's over, we're just gonna move on, business as usual. We wanna make money. Everybody wants to be in school to learn or in their businesses to make money again, but we all have to take ownership on this. And I hope if we have this discussion, I hope it's not just let us do what we wanna do and take personal responsibility, because it's not about personal responsibility, it's about making sure everybody's taken care of. So that's what I have.
Councilmember Peschel?
Do you have anything to say?
I do, but.
Because
I'm sorry.
I've spoken tonight, so I'd like to let another voice go before me.
Yes.
Thank you. I think, so I'm supportive of seeing this move forward, having a discussion similar to the points that have been made. I think it's important that we can come together and figure out, solutions that we can work on together to get through this quicker, because we've all been impacted by this, and with employees who've had to quarantine, that impact on business. I think we need to be able to bring together these partners and discuss what ideas we might have. I did want to bring up, there's a question about local data specific to municipality. There is data available on the county health department. Weekly they release their data by municipality.
Maybe I can connect you, because I've been on a million times, and maybe it's just because my screen is so
It's
small.
down at the
that I
bottom
can't
of the update, like, it's
Okay.
kind of like, it says new, and then it says data summaries by municipality.
Maybe it's just not, I can't
Yeah, it's
pull
just
it up
last
here.
week they started
Okay.
It's
doing
released
that.
every Thursday. And
Okay.
It's posted on the.
If nothing else, I'll try to pull it up on my.
And I guess,
my hard
just
drive.
add one other thing that, it's really great getting these calls, because, there are people who, did kind of react to, oh my gosh, we're gonna be, shut down. And then, some were offering, suggestions or thoughts or ideas, and it seems like, one of them was, well, maybe we just need to, close bars down at 11 p.m. Because there's more of a chance of something happening or whatever. But it was just, to hear folks like saying, we don't really think that we're even meeting those capacity limits that were part of the recovery stages initially, right? I think probably the same individual that we spoke with. He said, I wish I had 50% capacity. I apologize if it sounded as if I was saying, yes, we've got to come up with more restrictions. And that was kind of, what was in my head at the time. But there are so many other ideas out there about ways in which to handle it. And, it does seem like folks can share some resources. But I think that what we're seeing right now is people are self-selecting about where they go. And we are losing businesses. I think you all driven around town and seen the signs temporarily closed. And those are the ones who are reaching out saying, it's not fair that we closed. But these places over here are not doing the same responsible behaviors. And, here we are on this list again, the top 3, 2, whatever it is. Yes.
So, I'm sitting here thinking about the opportunities that we as a council and that even all of these entities that we're kind of talking about today, and about the missed opportunities that, we're several months into this now, and for some odd reason right now we're just thinking that it's time to talk to our business community, it's time to talk to the Tavern League, go EDC, which we did some of that early on because we realized the economic impact of this, and we created those funds and those loans, and that was great. That was a wonderful response. But I think people in our community, not just residents, not just business owners, economic drivers in our community, but the the terrible nature that has existed in our community and how to address this, how to implement steps to reducing COVID in our community in regarding to masks, and the vehement nature sometimes of we're going to make it really hard for you to talk about how to do these things, I think has really held us back as a council from realizing that we are the leaders in our community, not just us, but also with the great staff of Mark and doing that. But we missed an opportunity several months ago to say, hey, maybe we convene this committee, this subgroup. And I didn't think of it. You know, at that time, I was caught up in the craziness of what was going on around us. Any time that we tried to talk about doing things that we thought were going to be beneficial to our community. And so I think this is very important to do. I wish we would have thought about it, or I wish that our relationships were strong enough and feasible enough within the community even 2 or 3 months ago that we could have moved forward in this conversation at that time. Because now we're kind of behind in the game, right? We're number 3 in the nation right now, and right now we're talking about having this conversation.
And is it too late? I don't know.
And that's what I don't think it's too late, but I don't. The challenge that I have is sometimes it takes us a long time to make things happen. And so if we go into this with the same fervor that we went into with the COVID response to our business community, in that sense of how do we do this together and where are the common areas where we can figure this out together to continue to reduce and to truly flatten the curve, because now it's a mountain. It's not a curve, it's a mountain. You know, we should, as leaders, should be implored to do this as quickly as possible now, because it's not one of these things where it's not going to happen. It happened, and now we're just talking about it. So
And I think the words are right now uncontrolled community spread.
So,
City Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You know, to your point, I think Mr. Guerin, if you talk to him, he'll talk about the uncontrolled community spread, and that's, I think, what they view it as, is that's what the situation we're in. So even isolating it by a certain area, it may have started somewhere, but now it's so widespread, it's pretty serious. Yeah, I appreciate everything Mr. Peschel said, but every city council in every city in this country is wrestling with this issue. This is not unique to Oshkosh. So I don't want you to beat yourselves up over this, but do you sit and do nothing? I guess the answer to that question came from after Councilmember Ford and Mayor Palmieri talked to me about this. I reached out to all of the agencies, groups that are on this list, and every one of them said they would be more than happy to get together with us. So you can beat yourself up over it, but they recognize that they want to talk. Now, some of them may say, I want to talk so that we don't have more regulations. Whatever their reasons are, they're willing to talk, and I think there's some value in that. And you know, the last person I spoke was with Mr. Guerin this morning, just to confirm that the council was going to have this discussion tonight, and he said, I've been coming to meetings for months, you know, I'm coming. So everybody indicated their willingness to show up. If there are any other ideas, the mayor kicked out a couple more ideas, and you know, I think there's having the community discussing this, and I think the wording that we wrestled with a little bit over it, but it wasn't about a specific rule, because that was originally the mayor's idea, but then as she talked it through,
I was
it
just
like,
asking if that's even something that's even possible. Not that we should, just is it even enforceable? And from what I understand right now, and I'm not the expert, there's nothing that we can do that is enforceable.
so what can we do as a community?
But what can we do as a community? And having faith in this community, because look at what happened during Safer at Home in Oshkosh. Neighbors were helping neighbors. Some way, they were figuring it out, how to get food, how to get diapers to others in need. We figured it out because we cared about each other. And was it perfect? No. And then we had a little bit of reprieve, and the warm weather came out, and some of us got complacent. I'll admit, I haven't been 100%. And then as fall approached, and we started to get these little blips, it's like, oh, wait a minute. We do have a large number of folks that will be coming together indoors, our indoor season. And so, you know, some of the fears were stoked, and some of the, I call them the free flyers, were, nope, I'm gonna live life, you know. So I hope this isn't a false dilemma, an either or thing. It doesn't have to be either or. It's more of a, okay, we're out of time, folks. So what should we do next collectively to build our further resilience from what we're experiencing at this point in time? How quickly can we recover from what we're experiencing now and into the next fall months? I don't know.
If council would like me to, I'd be more than happy to try to arrange a meeting. Just give me a time frame that you're looking to have it. The mayor had talked about sooner rather than later. You know, we got budget workshops on the 19th and 20th of October. I think the mayor's intent was, because we have a 3-week lag between meetings, our next council meeting is October 13th. Do you want us to try to throw something together next week? And I hate to use the term throw together, because I think it's really just about starting a dialogue with.
Well, you got kind of a save the date without the date, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, if there are any dates in particular, I mean, I could have my executive assistant Diane reach out to council members, whether it's some type of doodle poll or something, and just see what your availability is.
I agree with the mayor. You know, I think if we're moving forward with the discussion, I think sooner than later is very important, because the longer we wait, the more speculation and anxiety amongst the entire community. So I concur, definitely. I mean, I don't know what my availability is next week, because obviously, well, let's see, we don't have council next week. But yeah, I would say if Diane could maybe throw us out some dates as quickly as possible, we could find something from there. You know, and I think also too, this will give, you know, the stakeholders that we've invited to come, because we don't know what challenges they're having either. You know, because obviously there's many businesses that, you know, wanted compliance before there was even a state mandate. You know, and if there's something on our end that we can help to communicate to make things better there for everyone. I mean, again, I don't think it's a bad idea. I just wanted to make sure that our intent is clear.
And I just shared too that another conversation that came out of this was connecting the dots for me, and that was the cab company called, one of the cab companies called and was sharing that, you know, they have some contracts for paratransit that are, you know, they bid those at a really low rate based on the assumption that they collect this after bar fares that kind of help offset them taking and doing this kind of community service at a lower rate, and that if capacity were limited or bar time was ended at 11 or whatever, that it would basically prevent them from potentially continuing to offer that service effectively if they lost this other business. And so, I mean, when we do talk about these things publicly, you know, those kind of conversations take place. You know, you don't not talk about it, and that's like saying, you know, don't talk about sex and nobody's going to get pregnant. I mean, come on. Councilmember Kraus?
I think the way we got to look at it, we got to get these people to have community buy-in. If it's 5% better than they're doing now, or 20% or 30%, whatever number, if it's improvement, it's improvement. Obviously, everything is important. It's just we have to figure out what's more important and be honest with ourselves, and these businesses have to be honest with themselves too, and figure out what's more important. I think looking at this list, a lot of these people are self-employed, or they have the type of jobs that can show up any day of the week. They can make it happen if it's for their business or their livelihood. So the sooner the better. We could have a meeting as early as next week, any time of the day. I think that's what the city deserves. I mean, I don't know if it's complacency or just giving up. You go to the farmer's market every Saturday, less and less people are wearing masks. Is it people just giving up, saying, well, nobody's wearing them, so why am I looking out for them? So I mean, we need to get everybody on board, and we got to do better. So
14 vendors I counted
Yeah.
Saturday mid-morning, 14 vendors. Those are the folks who agreed that they were going to do this. We granted the, special event. 14 vendors. Not.
And then I go into the post office this week, and somebody walks in without a mask on, and they're singing, masks don't work. I mean, that small percentage of the people are ruining it for everybody else. So I mean, we don't need to call people out, but I mean, people have to be accountable. So.
Personal choices matter.
Personal choices matter for everybody. It's just like secondhand smoke. I mean, people complain that we're smokers. I want to be able to smoke in my restaurants, but it caused problems for people that don't smoke. And this is causing problems for people that wear masks. So, I mean, if we're all in this together, and science speaks the truth, it's not an opinion.
Madam Mayor, I believe my direction is to poll council for a meeting next week.
Yes.
I will do that, and I'll probably lean towards the evening so that we can get as many of you in as possible. And the business community seemed to indicate they were willing to do that, so I will do that first thing in the morning.
All right, thank you.
So, Mark, if you could throw in some dates during the time as well. I know that might restrict some of us, but just, if you can, just throw some daytimes in there as well.
Oh, some daytime?
Yep.
Okay.
So.
I'd be happy to do that.
So.
All right.
Thank you,
Anybody
Madam Mayor.
else? All right, take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.